Hello, this video is on chapter 17 of managerial economics. In this chapter we talk about making decisions with uncertainty, and these slides are based on managerial economics book by Frobe, McCann, Shore, and Ward. In this chapter we talk about uncertainty and how it can be related to business decisions. We talk about random variables and how we use them to model uncertainty and talk about expected costs and benefits associated to decisions. We talk about uncertainty in pricing and how we can make trade-offs, something that we can measure them with some models. We talk about high and low values of goods to customers and how we can use mathematical modeling to see what is the best price to charge in different circumstances. We talk about one way of finding related data that is necessary in decision making, and that is difference in difference. And we talk about how the errors and expected errors can be costly. We talk about the differences between risk and uncertainty as well at the end of this chapter. As you know, we start chapters with some examples that let's talk about Teleswitch, which is a large telecom supplier, and it used to sell its products only through distributors before 2000. And in 2000, some of their largest clients, they came in and said they want to deal directly with Teleswitch themselves, and they were hoping they can avoid the middleman distributor in between. But now here is the dilemma for Teleswitch. If Teleswitch did not listen to large clients, they could have lost their large customers. Like, there were not many of them, but they had a lot of buy and purchasing from them if they didn't switch. On the other hand, if they decided to switch and sell to them directly, then some of the distributors would not like that decision, and they may have quitted and started working for the others, for example. So although the distributors would only, if a distributor leaves, they would only lose the small customers, but there were a lot of customers that would be lost, and that would be a big blow as well. Now we want to see which of these two would be a larger loss for the company, right? And here we need to be able to measure the risk of what are the risks of large customers leaving, or rather the risks of losing distributors themselves. So we want to see how we can manage the risk here. And basically we are going to assign some probabilities to each of them and see how we can work with those probabilities, right? In many other business decisions, the similar problem, right, exists there, and that is related to uncertainty. And here in this chapter, we want to see how we deal with uncertainty, at least to the degrees that is possible. By modeling uncertainty, we can learn how to make better decisions. We can find the sources of risk in decisions, or at least some of the sources of risk in the decisions will be identified, and then we can find some value, and we can understand the value of collecting more information and how we can compute or make our computations based on that. The first and most important definition here in this chapter is random variable. And random variable is basically a way that we assign numerical numbers, numerical outcomes, and we relate them to the probabilities that those outcomes may occur with. This is not, let's say, formal mathematical definition, but I think this is good enough to be able to use random variables in practice here. So if we want to represent some values that are uncertain, first we find what are all the possible values that can happen. So we call the variable, the random variable is called variable because there are different values that it can take, right? So those are varies by basically the values, right? Then to each of those possible values, we are going to assign a probability that reflects by what chance that value may occur. And then usually after finding this, we need to find something called expected value that is very important in order to make judgments that are correct. We do some of it in this chapter. You're going to see it in later chapters as well. Expected value is basically the average of the outcomes, average of the possible values, and the average is a weighted average of the values, and probabilities are used as weights. I'm going to make an example to make it more clear. For example, if we have a random variable that only two values are the values that may happen, right? Two expected values are there. Let's call the two x1 and x2. We call such a random variable a binomial random variable. Like when you toss a coin, right? There can be only heads or tails. So there are two different scenarios that can happen that can be modeled using a binomial random variable. We just need to assign numbers to heads and tails to make it a random variable, to have value there instead of head or tail, but other than that, no, it's a binomial case. Now we assign probabilities p and 1 minus p. Remember that sum of all the probabilities that are involved should be equal to 1. So probability of x1 occurring plus the probability of x2 occurring, they should add up to 1. For simplicity, if I assume x happens with probability p, because the rest of all probabilities until 1 should be given to 2, then I put 1 minus p to refer to probability of x2 happening. Or the two probabilities of p and 1 minus p, if I add them together, they add up to 1. Now, as we said, expected value is what? Is sum of x1 and x2 is the weighted average of them with p and 1 minus p, or probabilities used as weights. So if you want to write expected value of x, and this is how we refer to expected value. So letter E, and inside the braces we put the random variable, right, which is x in this case, but E in those braces talks that we are talking about expected value, and x is the random variable. Now p, probability of x1 happening times the value of x1 itself, plus probability of the x2 happening, which is 1 minus p times x2. Now a trinomial random variable is a random variable that takes 3, that is only possible to take 3 different values. Let's assume those numbers are x1, x2, and x3. Then the probabilities will be, probability of x1 happening will be p1, probability of x2 happening will be p2, and for x3, because sum of all probabilities should be 1, probability of x3 happening will be 1 minus p1 minus p2. For such a variable, the expected value will be p1 times x1 plus p2 times x2 plus 1 minus p1 minus p2 times x3. Let's make an example with a trinomial variable. So it's a wheel of cash, and it's a carnival game, right? There is a wheel, it has a pie shape, and it's divided into thirds. Okay, so 1/3 of it, if that turns out to be where the wheel stops, you will get 100. If the second third happens, is $75, and if the third part happens, it's a $5 payoff, right? So these are the numbers or the rewards paid on the wheel, and the game costs $50 to be played. We want to see whether we should play such a game or no, or is there any real chance of winning anything in this game. Well, first of all, yeah, it's a game with uncertainty, right? You can pay 50 and the wheel stops in 5, so you will lose $45, right? But the wheel can also stop on these others. So there is uncertainty here, but we want to see how fair this game is. Now, with the 3 possible outcomes, assuming they are equally likely to happen, because the wheel is divided into 3/3, so the chance of each of these happening will be 1/3. So the expected value of the payoffs will be 1/3 times 100, 1/3 times 75, and 1/3 times 5, and that is $60. Now, what does $60 mean? Well, obviously, if you play the game only one time, you never earn $60. You either earn 5 or 75 or 100. It's only these 3 numbers that is possible. But $60 expected value means if you keep playing this game over and over again, on average, on all the games played many times, right? On average, you will earn $60 in each. So the average payoff, or the expected payoff, would be 60. You pay $50 to play, so the payoffs, what you earn, expected earnings are larger than what you pay. So this is a game that is good if you play, right? Basically, if you ever find such a good game, just keep repeating it and earn free money, right? Because if you play it enough times, you will earn $60 on average. You are paying less to play each, so basically you will earn free money, which is not possible to find, at least easily. Now, another thing, right? Let's assume the wheel is not fair and it's biased toward $5 in a way that it's 2/3 likely for a 5 to come, and the 1/3, the rest, is divided between $175. So 1/6 is the probability of 100, 1/6 is the probability of 75, and 2/3, much more likely, is the probability of 5. Now, if I find the expected value for this wheel, right now probabilities are different, payoffs are the same. Now, expected value is 32.5, the expected value of the payoffs, right? And now this number is less than 50. So if you keep playing this game, you keep losing money after dollar. So if it's like the second one, it's better not to play such a game. Now let's go back to the teleswitch example that we started the chapter with. Here is one way that they can deal with the problem that they have. Let's assume it's 0.60 or 60% likely that teleswitch lose customers, and it's 0.2 or 20% likely that teleswitch would lose distributors, right? Customers are the large customers, distributors are the ones that at least they are better in dealing with smaller customers, right? And well, there are 2 decisions that telecom can make. We want to see which one is better. One is to sell directly to large customers, and the other decision is to keep doing the same, sell only through dealers, right? If they sell through the customers, well, some distributors may leave, right? And some may not, right? So if we assume distributors leave, there is 0.2 is the chance of distributors leaving. So with probability of 0.2, right? They will only earn a profit of $30. Low profit because distributors are not there. And then there is high profits if distributors stay. The profits are here $130. And since probability of distributors leaving is 0.2, probability of them staying will be 0.8. Now for the other decision, if they decide to sell through the dealers only, right? So there is a chance of losing customers, the large customers. So large customers may leave and then firm profit would drop to $100 and it's 0.6 the probability. Or large customer may stay, the firm can still sell 130, but this can only happen with probability of 0.4. Now in order to see whether selling directly to large customers is better or selling through the dealers, we can find the expected value of either case and compare them. So 0.2 times 30 plus 0.8 times 130 is $130. So that's the expected payoff or profits by selling directly to large customers. On the other hand, 0.6 times 100, 0.4 times 130, that will be equal, added together, that will be equal to $112. So here the payoffs are larger, so it's better for teleswitch under these circumstances to sell through the dealers or continue to sell through the dealers. So it depends on, obviously it depends on how we assign these probabilities. Let's assume they have a good assessment of what these probabilities are, and I think it's easier to find the profits under each case. Now let's go and look at another example, and we had a similar entry and incumbent or fighting entry example in chapter 15. Here we want to make it a probabilistic, right? So we don't know whether when an entrant enters a market, how much will be the retaliation by the incumbent, right? Or accommodation, how easy the incumbents accommodate the entry, right? So we can assign probabilities of how likely it is for the incumbents to accommodate or fight the entry, right? So now let's assume we have such thing in mind, and let's assume it's 50-50 chance probability of retaliation. Okay, so the entrant may decide to enter or stay out, right? If the entrant stays out, no matter what the incumbent prices, price low or price high, because it's out, the entrant profit will be 0, where it's still 50-50, let's assume, to incumbent pricing low or high, or accommodating with price high, or fighting with price low. But since payoffs are 0, entrant is not entered, the expected profits will be 0. Now for the entrants to enter, right? If they enter and the incumbent keep pricing high, right, to accommodate basically, then the entrant profit will be $60. If the entrant enters and the incumbent price is low or starts to retaliate basically, then the entrant profits will be -$40. We assumed it's 50-50 which one the incumbent does, right? So expected value will be 0.5 times 60 plus 0.5 times -40, and that will be $10. So in this case, the expected value of entering is larger than expected value of staying out. This is a more realistic view of the entry decision than just the model we talked about in chapter 15, right? By comparing the expected values, we can make the decision here. Now let's have an example on the uncertainty in pricing, the uncertainty in pricing comes when the demand for the product is unknown, right? We don't know by what price, how many we can sell. One way to model uncertainty in pricing is to classify the potential customers, right? So for example, we can have some high value and low value customers. High value customers are willing to pay $8 for the item. Low value customers are willing to pay $5 for the item. And for simplicity, I have assumed that the number of customers in each group are the same. And then let's assume the marginal cost is $3 per item. We want to see what is the optimal price. Is to price high or price low? Right. If we price high, we will earn $5 per sale, right? $8 is the price, $3 is paid as cost, so the difference is $5. So $5 is what we earn, or the profit per item. But if we price high, we only say to high value customers, it will be 50% of the time, right? So the expected value will be 5 times 0.5. If we price low, on the other hand, we would earn $2 per sale, right? $5 is price, $3 is the cost, the difference is 2, so $2 are profits per sale. And now we sell that to everyone, right? 100% of the time we can sell this. If we want to draw such a game, we will have something like that, right? We can make two decisions, price high and price low. We have high value and low value customers. If we price high, there will be 0 profit from low value customers, $5 from high value customers, and the expected value here will be 2.5. If we price low, there will be $2 profit for high value and $2 profit for low value customers, but this time 50% of the time we sell to high value and 50% of the time we sell to low value. So the expected value will be 0.5 times 2 plus 0.5 times 2, which is equal to $2. But in this case, given the numbers, we find that pricing high is more profitable, right? Although we lose half of the customers, but we earn enough from the high value customers to justify the high price. Now, this can be base for price discrimination, right? If there is a way for the seller here, right, to distinguish between the two types of customers and then set a high price for one group and prevent the arbitrage from one group to the other, right? Then you can price high dollars to the high value customers and $5 to the low value customers, and obviously that will be the largest profit possible, right? And we can think of, we talked about the price discrimination before, and you can see, you probably can find how will be the profits there, but here we are not, in previous example, we didn't talk about such a situation. But one part of having a business is always try to find these type of customers, right? You can think about when you wanna buy a car from a dealership, right? How the salesperson there tries to find whether you are a high or low value customer so that they know how to make the most profit out of you, whether they have to charge you high or low. And then you can also think of, well, if you are the buyer there, what can you do to defend yourself? Now, one very important thing is how we find the numbers, data to put here, right, for the profits, probabilities, and everything that we have. And here we discuss one thing that is very widely used, and it's one very important method of finding some data for the decisions you want to make in your business, right? And this is what we call it running a natural experiment. We try to run an experiment to predict what would happen in a larger scale. Let's assume there is a national restaurant chain and there is a regional manager that wants to see whether a special holiday menu is profitable or no. Well, if we just offer the special holiday menu, if he decides to offer the special holiday menu in all the branches during the holiday, it's not possible to see. Well, obviously during the holiday the sales will be larger. We don't know whether the larger sale is because of the special menu, because of the holiday effect, both of them, right? Or what part of higher sales is because of the menu and what part is because of the holiday season itself, right? One way to overcome this is to pick some of the restaurants randomly, like half of the restaurants in the region, and give the menus to those half and use the other half restaurants as control, and then see by how much the sales in both the control and the treatment, or the chosen restaurants with the new menu, by how much their sales have changed from before the holiday. So we find the difference in sales over time before the holidays and when the holidays are there, right? And we find the difference of these differences between the control and the new menu restaurants. That's why we call such natural experiments, or the method here, difference in differences. So we have one difference before after, one difference between the experimental and the control groups. And since we are having these two groups control with each other, we can control for many of the unobserved factors like the holiday effect itself and many things that we cannot even think of, right? And make a decision whether the menu is helpful or no. Using this method, this manager compared and saw that the increase in the sales in the restaurants with the holiday with the menu was the same as the increase in the control group. So she decided that, well, the menu was not effective in increasing the sales. So this is one method, but you can think of, well, in many practical cases you can use such a framework to analyze what happens. Now, sometimes when we are doing decisions, it's better to think about minimizing the costs rather than maximizing the profits, right? Minimizing costs would also increase your profit as well, right? So let's have some discussion about the cost minimization when we have uncertainty. Especially here, this is very important when we talk about what are the losses under different scenarios, right? A non-business example is, should we impose a carbon tax or no, right? Well, if we impose the tax and global warming is caused by human activity, then the tax would allow us to reduce that global warming, which is effective, right? But there is a slight chance that global warming is not caused by human activity. Well, let's assume that there is a good chance for that. And if that's the case, then having the carbon tax would only reduce the economic activity without having any effect on global warming and Earth itself, right? So there is a chance of the policy not being effective because of that, right? So let's assume there is a probability P that global warming is caused by human activity, and, well, on the other hand, the probability 1 minus P is it's not caused by human activity. If there is no carbon tax with probability of P, we have a cost that we call it cost 2, or error cost 2, or cost of error type 2 of not imposing a tax when we should have, right? And then with probability 1 minus P, we may have an error cost 1, or cost of error type 1. And that is when we impose something, a tax, when in fact we shouldn't have. So here we have two types of error. We call them type 1 and type 2. In this context, type 1 error is the failure to tax when global warming is caused by human activity. To fail to tax when they should have taxed. Type 2 error is to impose a tax when we should not have taxed, right? We put the carbon tax when warming is not caused by human activity. Now here are two different costs. Now the best decision is to find a probability that each of these costs may happen. If the 1 minus p times cost of type 1 is less than p times cost of type 2, then what? It's more costly to have the type 2 error, right? So it's better to impose the tax in this case. Right, so we are minimizing the expected errors. This type of decision can happen a lot in business decisions, right? You don't know whether you have to price high or price low in order to have enough sales, for example. If you have hotel rooms, right, you don't know whether you have to price high or price low in order to have all of your rooms sold out and at the same time not to sell them so cheap and earn maximum profit that is possible, right? So when there is capacity, a lot of such questions happen, right? And it can be also production, right? Whether you produce more or produce less, especially when you cannot keep your production for a long time, for example. So all of these are type of these costs and what happens if your estimates are not correct. And the last important thing in this chapter is the difference between risk and uncertainty. Risk is basically how we characterize the uncertainty that is out there for the values and variables and the phenomena, right? So risk is when we actually put that random variable in place to model the uncertainty. But uncertainty is actually the distribution of the random variable, right? The nature of something that we may not even be able to model it, right? So uncertainty is more important, it has more broader impacts, and it's something that usually we cannot control for. For risk, especially when talking about financial markets, the risk can be predicted, it can be even priced, and it can be controlled for using the financial instruments that are there. But uncertainty is something that is very hard to deal with. One very important thing was, let me skip this slide and come back to that, but one very important thing was the housing crisis. All of it was we were not, or the financial institutions were not able to translate the uncertainty that were there in some of the actions they take. They were not able to translate that into a risk that they can control for. And that was basically because of some errors in the mathematical formula. The relationship was developed by Dr. David Lee, and it wanted to find, the correlation between the returns of some various type of assets that were tied together, and they were called collateralized debt obligations. Different assets of different types were sold together. There were uncertainty involved in, how their value would turn out to be. Dr. Lee proposed a solution on how to value these, and that was based on credit default swaps, or CDS. But the problem was we didn't have much data there, and the only data that were available was when the housing prices were going up, and no one knew that if housing prices started going down, then the relationship would be something different. And that did turn out to be the case, and you know what happened after that. Then In order to deal with the uncertainty, especially when it's not possible to model it like risk, there are some strategies that people use. For example, Best Buy tries to use some non-experts, right, in some disparate sets in order to predict what is the future variables, what are the holiday sales and others, right? To not only rely on experts, but rely to the general opinion. Or, for example, Google uses internal prediction markets, right, to be able to generate the demand and usage forecast. And here I have a quote from US Marine Advice that, well, we cannot eliminate uncertainty. It will be there. The only thing we can do, or the best we can do, is to try to be prepared, right? Develop simple, flexible plans, planning for likely contingencies, develop standing operating procedures and others, and that is how we should be prepared for uncertainty. This is when we don't know what is going to happen, so we make ourselves prepared for that. So this said, we have come to the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Please let me know if there is any concerns, and have a great day.